I never thought I'd have to fight for my own grave. The morning after my minor health scare, I woke up to a call that shattered everything. My son, Ricky, he didn't just disappoint me. He sold my burial plot, the one next to my late husband. And when I confronted him, he didn't even seem to care. His wife, Stacy, stood there grinning like it was no big deal. They sold it behind my back, for cash. And when I found out, I knew something wasn't right. But what I didn't expect was the truth that came crashing down next, a truth that would ruin everything. The worst part, they didn't even know I had the original deed locked away, safe. But I wasn't going to let them get away with this, not without a fight. Let me tell you how this all unfolded. Welcome to her Kindle. In today's story, we dive deep into betrayal, deceit, and revenge. If you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. It all started with a simple flutter in my chest. Just a little something that didn't seem like much, but enough to make me pause and wonder. I've always been strong, raised 3 kids on my own, kept the house running after my husband passed. I'd thought I was invincible, but this felt different. I woke up that morning with a tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away. A dull ache. My hand went to my heart instinctively. And that's when I started to feel it. The dizziness. The cold sweat. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just stress. But the more I ignored it, the worse it got. I was always the one to take care of everyone else. My children, my house, my life. But now, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it to the phone in time to call for help. I sat there, in the middle of my living room, feeling my world start to tilt. My breath was shallow. My hands were clammy. Every thought in my head was about one thing. What if I didn't make it? What if just like that, I was gone? And all I would leave behind would be paperwork and an old house filled with memories. And nothing for my kids. I pushed the thought away, but it lingered, pressing against my chest like that unbearable ache. That afternoon, after the doctor gave me the all clear, I knew something had changed inside me. I hadn't been prepared for what came next. I was alive, but I felt like I'd seen something, a kind of warning. I hadn't been paying attention to what mattered most. The first thing I did when I got home from the doctor's was go straight to my desk. It had been sitting there, untouched, just like it always was, tucked away in the back corner of my office, in a drawer. I hadn't thought about it in years, but that was before the scare. Now, it felt like I needed to protect it, the deed to my burial plot, the one next to my late husband, the plot we'd chosen together right after we'd gotten married. The plot I thought would stay safe, like everything else that mattered to me. I had never moved it before, but that day, I didn't hesitate. I slid the deed from the drawer, carefully holding it, then locked it away in a bank vault, just in case. It wasn't that I was scared for myself. No, I wasn't afraid of dying. But what if something happened? What if I wasn't there when the time came, and my kids had to deal with everything? I didn't trust them to make the right decisions without me, especially now. So I locked it away. It was safe, at least for now. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. The next morning, my son Ricky called. I could hear the cheer in his voice before he even spoke. He told me that he and Stacy, his wife, had something to celebrate. "We did it, Mom," he said. "We're going to be okay." I didn't ask. I was still reeling from the scare. But when I pressed him, he hesitated. He told me, with that strained excitement, that they'd just sold the property across town. Some land they had been trying to flip for months. I was happy for them, happy that my son was taking charge of his life. But I didn't know the truth yet. The truth was they weren't celebrating the sale of land. They were celebrating the sale of my grave. The moment Ricky hung up, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, that feeling that had been there for months, but that I brushed off. The one that told me I needed to pay attention. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something was wrong. Later that day, I stopped by my office. Something in the back of my mind made me check the drawer again. The drawer where I had hidden the deed. I pulled it open and scanned the contents. It was empty. My heart stopped for a moment. I turned the desk upside down, tearing through every paper, every folder. The deed wasn't there. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking. I checked the bank vault. It was safe. The deed was secure. But that didn't stop the fear from creeping in. What had they done? My son Ricky, my own flesh and blood, had sold the burial plot I'd chosen with my late husband, without telling me, without asking. I wasn't even sure how they managed to get their hands on it. I thought I had hidden it well enough. But somehow they found it. The photocopy. They thought they could get away with it. And maybe they would have if it weren't for the fact that I had the original locked away, out of their reach. For a moment, I sat still, just letting the weight of the betrayal wash over me. I felt the anger rise in me like a fire, but it was the cold, calculating kind of anger. The kind of anger that comes with realizing you've been played. I wasn't going to let this go. Ricky and Stacy had crossed a line they didn't even know existed. And they were going to learn the hard way that I wasn't the weak old woman they thought I was. I'd make sure of it. But first, I needed to figure out how they did it. How they thought they could get away with this. How they could betray their own mother so easily. I had my suspicions. I knew Stacy was always trying to get Ricky to take care of things for her. I'd seen her eyeing the money, eyeing anything of value. But I couldn't have imagined that Ricky, my son, would go along with it. He knew how much that plot meant to me. I decided then that I wouldn't just get even. I was going to get smarter. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. No, this was about making sure they understood just how far they'd crossed a line. I wasn't going to let them take something so precious from me without paying the price. The game was on. And this time, I was in control. If you've been following along and you're not yet subscribed, now's the time. What happens next will leave you shocked. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button and stay with us to the end of this journey. Ricky's behavior started to shift just a few days after I discovered the missing deed. At first, I thought I was imagining things. After all, he was my son. I knew him better than anyone, but soon enough, I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something had changed, and it wasn't just that his calls were fewer. It was the way he spoke to me, the way he acted when I brought up something even remotely important. He'd been distant for a while, but I chalked it up to his busy life, his work, his new house. But this time, it felt different. At first, I didn't confront him about the plot. I needed to understand what was going on, what had really happened. So I let it sit. I watched him. I observed his every move. And the more I did, the clearer it became. It wasn't just his silence. It was the nervousness. Ricky had always been the steady one. The one who would give you a straight answer, no matter what. But now he was changing. When he came to visit, he couldn't look me in the eye for more than a few seconds. And when I casually asked about the land deal he and Stacy were celebrating, there was a pause, longer than usual. "How's the property going?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. His answer was slow, almost hesitant. "It's good. Everything's fine." I felt it then, the shift. He wasn't being honest. Something about his tone didn't sit right with me. I couldn't pinpoint it exactly, but it was a gut feeling. You know, the one, the kind you get when you've known someone their whole life and you can tell when something's off. Then came the subtle, yet unmistakable signs of guilt. Ricky started to make excuses. He didn't have time to visit as much. He was busy with work. He stopped helping around the house like he used to. I didn't press him about it, but I noticed And when I mentioned needing a hand with a few things, there was a clear reluctance in his voice. It wasn't just me. Stacy was acting strange too. She'd always been a bit distant, but now there was something almost calculated about the way she behaved around me. She smiled a little too wide when she spoke, but her eyes, they were different. They were guarded, as if she knew more than she was letting on. It was clear to me, even if they didn't admit it, yet they were hiding something. I just didn't know what. I started paying attention to little things, small changes. Ricky would fidget when I mentioned my plans for the burial plot. It was subtle, but it was there. He wasn't eager to discuss it. In fact, he'd changed the subject quickly. But every time I pressed him, even just lightly, he would become defensive. "Mom, I told you, it's all handled. Stop worrying about it." But the more he said that, the more I felt that gnawing feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. And then, one day, Stacy called. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I picked up, I immediately knew something was off. There was a tone in her voice I couldn't ignore. She was trying to sound calm, but there was a nervous edge. She told me Ricky wouldn't be coming by that evening, that they had other plans. I didn't ask too many questions, but something about the way she said it made me uncomfortable. I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she was saying. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. If I couldn't get Ricky to talk, I'd have to do the next best thing, follow the money. I started looking into the sale. I went through every document I could find, every receipt, every trace. I needed to know the details, the exact steps they had taken to sell my burial plot. That's when it hit me, the forgery. Ricky and Stacy hadn't just taken the deed. They had forged my signature. They'd somehow found a photocopy of the original deed and thought they could sell it off, thinking I'd never notice. They were betting on me being too old, too tired to fight back. But what they didn't count on was me being smart enough to lock away the original in a bank vault. I wasn't about to let them pull this off. Not when it was my legacy at stake. My husband's memory. They thought they could play me for a fool. But I had been watching them, listening, waiting for the right moment to make my move. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Ricky wasn't the man I thought he was. And Stacy, she was just as bad. They weren't just greedy. They were calculating. And I had to admit, I underestimated just how far they would go to get what they wanted. But they weren't going to win this time. They thought they could hide behind lies and forged documents. But they were wrong. I had something they didn't, the truth. And now it was time to use it. The game had changed. And they weren't going to like what happened next. It wasn't until I went to check the deed again that the full weight of what had happened hit me. I had already put the original deed in the bank vault, locked away just as a precaution, but something wasn't sitting right. The closer I looked at the situation, the more questions kept circling in my mind. How did they even get their hands on the deed? They didn't have the key to the vault. I kept wondering if Ricky had found a way to slip something out of my desk without me noticing. But I had checked every drawer, every file. The deed wasn't there. I spent the next few days combing through the house. I couldn't leave it alone. Not until I knew for sure what they'd done. It wasn't just about the burial plot. It was about respect, about trust. It was about knowing that after all I had done for them, they thought I was an easy target. That afternoon, I sat down at my desk, the place I'd spent so many hours organizing my life. I knew I had to check everything. I opened the drawer again, slowly this time, as if doing so too fast would somehow make the truth harder to face. I stared at the empty space. Nothing, not even the photocopy. My breath caught in my chest. The deed was gone. I had kept it in that drawer for years. It had never been touched. It wasn't the first time I checked the drawer, But this time, it felt different. I shut the drawer with a snap and stood up. I had to make sure. I needed answers. This was it. No more waiting. I grabbed the phone and dialed Ricky's number. He answered after the second ring, but there was a hesitation in his voice, like he knew something was wrong. "Hey, Mom," Ricky said, trying to sound casual. "What's up?" "I need to talk to you," I said. My voice was tight, controlled. "Where is it?" There was a long pause. A few seconds of silence before he answered. "Where's what, Mom?" "Don't play games with me. Ricky, I'm talking about the deed to the burial plot." There was a shift in the air between us, even though he wasn't there. I could feel it. He wasn't expecting me to ask. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his tone low, too low. "Cut the act, Ricky. I know what you did. I know what you and Stacy have been planning." Another beat of silence. I could almost hear him scrambling to come up with a reasonable explanation, but there was no good explanation. Not for this. "You sold it, didn't you? You and Stacy." My voice broke as I said the words, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. They had done something I couldn't just overlook. I don't know what you mean." Ricky's voice faltered for a split second, and in that moment, I knew. He was lying. "You sold my burial plot. You took something from me that was mine, something that meant more than you could ever understand. And now you're trying to cover it up, hoping I wouldn't notice." His voice was tight when he responded, almost pleading. "Mom, it's not like that. We were just trying to make things easier. It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I snapped, my anger rising. "You thought you could sell it without me ever knowing, didn't you? Well, you didn't count on me being smart enough to keep the original locked away. You didn't count on me seeing through your lies." I could feel the weight of the situation settling in, but I wasn't done. Not yet. I had to dig deeper. "Tell me, Ricky," I said, lowering my voice. "How did you get the photocopy? Did you forge my signature? Or did Stacy find a way to get to it? Did she pressure you? Was it her idea?" I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, but he didn't answer. I waited, letting the silence linger. "Mom," he finally said, his voice small. "We didn't think it would be a big deal. I didn't mean to hurt you. Stacy, she just thought it would help us. We were struggling with some things, and she thought we could use the money." I felt a cold fury rise in me, hearing him try to justify it. They were both responsible. Ricky wasn't just the innocent son he thought he was. He was as much a part of this betrayal as Stacy. "You sold it," I said, my voice unwavering, "and you tried to cover your tracks. You didn't think I'd find out. You didn't think I'd notice. But now you've crossed a line." I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. For a while, I just stood there, staring at the desk, my hands shaking. I couldn't believe it. My son, the one I had raised, the one I thought I could trust, had done this. I had always done everything for him, for the family. I had taken care of them, made sure they never went without. And now they thought they could take what was mine, what my husband and I had planned together. I felt the rage building inside me, but it wasn't just anger. It was something deeper. It was the realization that my trust had been broken, and once that trust was gone, there was no going back. I couldn't let them get away with it. No, this wasn't something I could just brush under the rug. I wasn't going to let them steal from me. Not now. Not ever. I was going to make them regret it. I was going to make them see just how wrong they were to think they could get away with this. But first, I needed to know how far they'd gone. I needed to see just how much they thought they could take from me before I did something they'd never expect. I had been quiet. I had been patient. But now, it was time for them to face the consequences. I wasn't going to let this go. It wasn't just about a plot of land or money. It was about respect, about trust, about a family betraying its foundation. They thought they could pull one over on me. They thought they could hide behind lies and forged documents. But they were wrong. I spent the next few days piecing everything together, watching Ricky, watching Stacy, keeping quiet. I needed them to think I was clueless, that I didn't know the full extent of their betrayal. It wasn't enough just to confront them with accusations. I needed hard proof. I needed to make sure they knew I wasn't just going to let them walk away unscathed. The more I dug into it, the clearer it became. They had forged my signature. But how? I had moved the original deed to the bank vault. How could they have gotten their hands on the photocopy and thought they could get away with it? I knew I needed to find the document they'd used to sell the plot. I couldn't afford to wait around any longer. I went to the records office, the one where I had filed all the necessary paperwork for my late husband's estate and the burial plot documents. I walked into the small, dimly lit office and approached the counter. The woman behind the desk, a clerk who knew me well, greeted me with a smile. "I need to check the records for the Cedar Lane burial plot," I said, my voice steady but sharp. She nodded and led me to the back of the office where they stored old files. It felt like an eternity as I waited for her to pull the documents. When she handed me the folder, I almost didn't want to open it, but I knew I had to. I needed to see the truth. I flipped through the pages until I found the document I was looking for, the deed. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked at it. There it was in black and white, a forged signature. My signature. But it wasn't real. I could tell immediately. The curves of the letters, the slant of the pen, it was off. The person who had forged it didn't have the same pressure, the same rhythm. It was sloppy. But who had done it? Ricky? Stacy? Or both? I felt my blood run cold. They hadn't just sold the plot. They had tried to erase me from it, like I was just some distant memory they could write off for a quick gain. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. I hadn't raised my son to be a liar, a cheat, a thief. I didn't want to believe that Ricky was capable of this. But now, the truth was right in front of me, staring me in the face. I folded the document back into the folder and headed for the door. My mind was racing. I needed to confront them, but I had to do it carefully. I couldn't let them know what I had found. Not yet. They needed to think they still had control, that I was still in the dark. As soon as I got home, I called Ricky again. This time, I could hear the hesitation in his voice before he even picked up the phone. I could tell he wasn't expecting me to reach out again so soon. But I was done waiting. I was done pretending. "I know about the forgery," I said, the words landing heavy between us. There was no more beating around the bush. No more pleasantries. He needed to face the consequences of his actions. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, his voice barely above a whisper when he finally spoke. "Mom, please, Don't try to deny it." I cut him off. "I saw the forged deed. You and Stacy thought you could get away with this, didn't you? You thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't know. But I'm not as blind as you think." I heard him swallow hard. "Mom, it's not like that. I never meant for it to go this far. I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice sharp now. "You sold my burial plot. You sold my place next to your father, Ricky, and now you're trying to cover it up like it's no big deal. You don't get to just walk away from this." He didn't respond right away. I could hear the shame, the regret, rolling through him, but it wasn't enough. It never would be. He had crossed a line. He had sold me out for his own gain, and I wasn't going to let him just sweep it under the rug. I hung up the phone, but the anger didn't leave. I knew I had to keep pushing, keep getting to the heart of this betrayal. The deed was just a symptom of something bigger. I had raised Ricky to be better than this. But now I saw the truth. He was just like his wife. Greedy, selfish, and willing to cross any line to get what they wanted. Stacy was just as much to blame, if not more. She had manipulated Ricky into this. I knew it. I could feel it. She had always been materialistic, always looking for the next thing, the next shiny object to grab. But selling my burial plot, that was crossing a line even she couldn't pretend to justify. I wasn't going to let them get away with it, not without making them see the full consequences of their actions. But this wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't about punishing them for the sake of it. It was about showing them that I still had power. I still had control. And no matter how much they thought they could steal from me, I was going to take it back. I wasn't going to let them tear apart what my husband and I had worked so hard to build. I was going to fight back. And this time, I wasn't going to hold back. The game had changed, and they weren't prepared for what was coming next. By now, if you're hooked on this story, make sure you're subscribed. We've only scratched the surface of what's coming next, and you'll want to be here when it all unfolds. Subscribe now, and stick around for the next shocking twist. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just Ricky's idea. No, this had Stacy's fingerprints all over it. I had seen the way she looked at money, the way she talked about things she wanted, new cars, vacations, luxuries that they couldn't afford. I always thought it was harmless, a bit of harmless dreaming, but now I saw it for what it really was. She wasn't just a dreamer. She was a manipulator, and she had her claws in Ricky deeper than I had realized. It hit me hard, realizing just how much she had pushed Ricky. I had watched them together, seen their interactions, but I had never really taken the time to understand the full extent of her influence over him. Stacy had always been careful with her words, but now I saw how strategic she was. She knew exactly how to work him, how to get him to do what she wanted. I remembered the last time I visited them. Ricky and Stacy were sitting at the kitchen table, and Stacy was talking about their finances. She wasn't asking for money directly, but she was dropping hints. If we could just get a little more saved up, we could go on that cruise, she said, her voice light, almost as if it was just an offhand thought. But I knew better. I saw the way she watched Ricky when she said it, the way she weighed his response. And Ricky, he didn't just agree. He jumped at the chance to make it happen. It wasn't long after that conversation that I noticed things started to change. Stacy began to push harder, and Ricky, well, he didn't fight it. I couldn't help but wonder if she had planted the idea of selling the burial plot into his head slowly over time until it was the only option that made sense to him. I didn't confront her directly, but I didn't need to. I knew what was going on. She had used her charm, her manipulation, to get Ricky to do what she couldn't do herself. She knew that he wouldn't question it. She knew that Ricky would never think twice about selling something that wasn't his to sell, especially if the money could get them closer to the life she wanted. It wasn't just that she wanted the money. It was more than that. Stacy wanted control. She wanted everything in her grasp, and she wasn't going to stop until she had it. She had already taken Ricky's attention, pulled him into her world, where only material things mattered. She didn't care who she hurt along the way, as long as she got what she wanted. I could see now how Ricky's behavior had changed, and it all pointed back to Stacy. It wasn't that he was a bad person. He had always been a good son, but Stacy had changed him, manipulated him into believing that her dreams were more important than anything else, including his mother's wishes. I watched them interact in the days that followed. Stacy's influence over him was undeniable. She knew how to play the game, how to make him feel like he was doing the right thing, even when he wasn't. I wasn't sure if Ricky even realized how deep he was in it. He thought he was doing what needed to be done, but he was blind to the truth. Stacy was pulling all the strings, and he couldn't see it. but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. No matter how much she thought she had control, I wasn't going to let her break the family apart. I wasn't going to let her tear apart my legacy for a few dollars. I decided it was time to confront Stacy. Ricky might have been manipulated, but Stacy, she was fully aware of what she was doing. She knew exactly what they had taken from me, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. One evening, I called Stacy, asking her to come over. I could tell she wasn't expecting it. I don't know if she thought I was going to let it slide, or if she simply thought I'd never figure it out. But when she walked through the door, I knew. I could see the guilt written all over her face. She sat down across from me, the same cold smile still on her lips, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat there, waiting for me to speak. "I know what you've done," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I know you pushed Ricky to sell my burial plot. I know you forged my signature, and I know you thought you could get away with it." Her eyes widened just a fraction, and in that moment I saw her mask slip. She wasn't as confident as she had been when she'd been manipulating Ricky. Now she was cornered, and she knew it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice shaking slightly, but even as she said it, I could see the cracks forming. "I wasn't buying it. I've seen the document, Stacy," I said, leaning in just a little closer. "I know you're the one who pressured Ricky into this. You're the one who wanted the money, and you used him to get it, but you didn't count on me finding out." She shifted in her seat, looking away from me. She didn't have an answer. I didn't expect her to. Stacy had always been good at hiding behind her charm, but now the truth was out. She could no longer pretend to be the innocent wife. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to let you tear this family apart for your own selfish desires. You and Ricky, you both crossed a line. But you're the one who pushed him. You're the one who manipulated him into doing something he never should have done." She stood up, her face flushed with anger, but there was fear in her eyes too. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she said, but I could tell it was just a defense mechanism. She knew. She knew I had her. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I had already made my point. Stacy had thought she was untouchable, that she could hide behind her husband's naivete. But now she was facing the consequences of her actions. As I watched her leave, I couldn't help but wonder how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. I knew one thing for sure. She had underestimated me. And now she was going to learn that when you mess with family, there are consequences. Real consequences. The silence after Stacy left was almost too much to bear. I stood there, my mind running over the conversation, over her face, her cold, defensive eyes, and I knew this wasn't going to end easily. I could feel the tension building, the weight of the betrayal hanging heavy on my chest. I had spent my life protecting my family, sacrificing for them. But in the end, it wasn't enough. Now, they were trying to take something that wasn't theirs, something that meant more than any material thing ever could. My final resting place, my peace, was nothing more than a pawn in their game. I knew I couldn't let this go. Ricky still hadn't fully grasped the severity of what they had done. But Stacy, she had to be stopped. She thought she had won, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I decided it was time to confront Ricky. I'd already called him out on the phone, but that had been nothing more than a warning. It was time to bring it all out into the open. I needed him to understand the consequences of his actions, and I needed him to know I wasn't just going to sit back and let him get away with this. I called him again that evening. This time, I didn't give him the chance to dodge the issue. "Ricky," I said, my voice controlled, but the anger was simmering beneath the surface. "You need to come over." Now, there was a hesitation on the other end of the line. I could tell he was trying to figure out what was coming next, but I didn't care. He needed to face the truth. He needed to see the damage they'd done. I'm busy, Mom. Can it wait? He asked, his voice betraying his nervousness. No, I replied, cutting him off. It can't wait. You're coming here, and we're going to talk. Face to face. The call ended, but I could feel my pulse quicken as I waited for him to arrive. I had no idea how this would go. I didn't know if Ricky was ready to face what he'd done, but I knew I had to make him face it. This wasn't just about the money or the plot. It was about what they had taken from me, my trust, my peace of mind, and the memory of my late husband. They thought they could erase all that with a forged signature and a quick sale. But this was going to be the moment they realized they couldn't take what wasn't theirs. When Ricky finally showed up, he didn't immediately come inside. He stood there in the doorway, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure if he should enter or leave. The tension between us was palpable. I could feel the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air. Come in, I said sharply, stepping aside to let him in. We need to talk. He walked in, his eyes avoiding mine as he sat down on the couch. I didn't waste any time. I know everything, Ricky, I began, my voice steady. I know about the plot, the sale, the forged signature. I know you and Stacy thought you could get away with it, but you're wrong. His face turned pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. Finally, he stammered, Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I didn't. Don't lie to me, I snapped. You sold my grave, Ricky. You and Stacy sold me out without a second thought. You didn't even have the decency to ask me. You thought you could just make it disappear, like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. He looked away, guilt written all over his face, but it didn't make up for what had happened. No amount of regret would take back the hurt he had caused. I was just trying to make things easier, Ricky said, his voice quieter now. Stacy thought. She thought it was the best thing to do. We needed the money, Mom. We were struggling. Struggling. I repeated, my voice rising. You think selling my burial plot was the answer? You really thought I wouldn't notice? You really thought this wouldn't come back on you? Ricky's shoulders slumped as he sank into the couch, his face filled with regret. But it was too late for apologies now. The damage had been done, and no amount of remorse could undo what they had done. You've hurt me more than you know, I said, my voice now quieter but no less firm. But what really breaks my heart, Ricky, is that you let her do this. Stacy doesn't care about you. She doesn't care about me. She only cares about what she can get. Ricky looked up at me, his face twisted in confusion. What do you mean? Stacy, she's been manipulating you this whole time, I said, my anger rising again. You don't see it, but I do. She's using you. She always has. And you let her. You let her convince you that this was the way to fix your problems. You think this was just a quick fix. It's not. It's the start of something much worse. She doesn't care about you, Ricky. She doesn't care about this family. I could see the realization beginning to settle in, like a fog lifting from his eyes. He was starting to see the truth that had been right in front of him the whole time. I didn't know what to do, Ricky muttered, his hands rubbing the back of his neck in frustration. I was just trying to fix things, make her happy. By selling my grave, I said, my voice tight with bitterness. You thought that was the answer? Ricky didn't have a response. There were no more excuses left to make. I stood up, walking over to the window, my back turned to him. I couldn't bear to look at him anymore. The pain was too much. The betrayal was too much. But I couldn't let it show. Not yet. You're going to fix this, Ricky, I said, my voice cold now. You're going to make it right. And you're going to stop letting Stacy tell you what to do. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He knew he had crossed a line, and now he had to live with the consequences. The confrontation had begun, and it was far from over. The night after I confronted Ricky was the hardest night I had ever spent in my life. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house. The weight of everything, of what had been stolen from me, of what my son and his wife had done, pressed on me like a physical burden. I wasn't just angry. I was sickened. How had I raised him to be this way? How had I let myself be so blind to Stacy's manipulation? I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept running, turning over the same thoughts. What now? What was the next move? I couldn't just let them off with an apology. Ricky needed to understand that this wasn't just a simple mistake. He and Stacy had crossed a line I couldn't let them erase. I knew it was time for the truth to come out. Ricky had already been caught in his lie. But Stacy, she hadn't fully understood the consequences yet. She thought I was done, that I'd let it go. But she was wrong. The following morning, I made sure to have everything in place. I called the lawyer. I didn't need to waste time anymore. I needed them both to understand that there were real consequences to their actions. I had already gathered enough to make sure they couldn't just walk away unscathed. I wasn't going to allow them to bury this, to pretend it didn't happen. I called Ricky, told him to bring Stacy with him when he came over. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, but I didn't care. I had given him every chance to make this right. Now, it was time for the truth to be laid bare. When they arrived, they were different. Ricky's eyes were red, probably from a sleepless night. And Stacy was wearing that same forced smile, trying to act like everything was fine. But I knew it wasn't. They both knew it wasn't. "Come in," I said, motioning for them to sit. "We need to finish this, once and for all." Stacy sat first, smoothing her hands on her lap, trying to look calm, but there was an edge to her that I hadn't seen before. Ricky looked like he wanted to say something, but he kept quiet. He knew this wasn't a conversation that could be saved with a simple apology. Not anymore. I sat down across from them, my hands folded in front of me. I looked at Ricky first. His face was drained, but there was something in his eyes. Guilt, yes, but something more. Fear. He knew what was coming. "I've spoken with a lawyer," I began, my voice low and steady. "The sale of the burial plot is void. The documents are invalid. I have the original deed, and I'm taking legal action against both of you." Stacy's face twisted in disbelief. "You're doing what?" she asked, her voice rising. "You're going to sue us over a plot of land, over something so trivial." I could feel the rage building in me, but I controlled it. I couldn't let her goad me into making a mistake. "This is not about the land, Stacy," I said, my voice sharp now. "This is about trust. This is about you and Ricky deciding that my wishes didn't matter. You thought you could just sell me out for a little cash, that I wouldn't notice. But now you have to face the consequences." Ricky looked down at his hands, his fingers twitching. "Mom, please, we didn't mean for it to get this far. Stacy she thought it would help us. And No. I cut him off, feeling the bitterness rise in my throat. "Don't you dare try to make this her fault. You both made this decision together. You let her push you into doing something you knew wasn't right. You chose this. And now you're going to deal with the fallout." Stacy's eyes narrowed. "You can't do this, Tabitha. You think you can just destroy everything because of a plot of land? You're being unreasonable." I leaned forward, staring her down. "I'm not doing this because of a plot of land. I'm doing this because you betrayed me, because you both thought I would just roll over and let you take what wasn't yours. You took something from me that I can never get back, my peace, my dignity." Ricky opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. "This isn't about you or Stacy anymore. This is about me and what you did, and you need to understand the full weight of it." I paused, letting the silence settle between us, letting them feel the heaviness of the words. "You're both going to make this right," I said, my voice hard. "You're going to return the money from the sale, and you're going to publicly admit what you did. Not just to me, but to everyone. Stacy laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think we're just going to apologize? That it's that simple. No, I said, my eyes locked on hers. I think you're going to face the consequences of your actions just like anyone else would. You're not above it. I could see the anger flash across her face. Her mask was slipping, but I wasn't done. This wasn't just about the plot or the money. This was about showing them both that they couldn't control me, that they couldn't use me as a pawn for their own gain. Ricky's face was pale now, his eyes wide. He was beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had done. It wasn't just the forgery or the sale. It was the trust he had broken. It was the damage he had done to our family. To me. I don't care if you're my son, I said, my voice low, but deadly serious. This goes beyond family. You've broken something here that can't just be fixed with words. You're going to make things right. Ricky, you're going to fix what you've done. And Stacy, I turned to her, my gaze cold. You're going to see just how much this costs you. Stacy opened her mouth to say something, but she didn't get the chance. I had already made up my mind. This was the point of no return. They had thought they could push me around, but now they were going to see just how far I was willing to go to get what I deserved. Get out, I said, the words leaving my mouth like a final verdict. We'll talk when you've figured out how to fix this. Ricky stood slowly, his head bowed, as if he couldn't look me in the eye. Stacy didn't say a word. She just followed him, but not before shooting one last venomous glance my way. As they left, I stood there, my heart racing, but I didn't feel the anger anymore. It was something else. Power. I had made my point, and now they knew that they hadn't just crossed a line. They had set something in motion they couldn't stop. The game was no longer in their hands. It was in mine. If you're still with us and haven't subscribed yet, now is your moment. What happens next will change everything, and you'll want to stay with us till the end. Click that subscribe button and join us as we close out this wild ride. The days that followed their departure were thick with silence. I knew they were both stewing in their own guilt, but I didn't care. What mattered now was that I had finally drawn the line. No more excuses, no more games. What they had done to me was unforgivable, and I wasn't about to let it slide. Ricky had left without a word, but I could feel the weight of the unspoken between us. He knew, deep down, that his actions weren't just an oversight. What they had done went beyond money. It was about trust. He had betrayed me in a way that no apology could ever undo. And Stacy, well, she was just as guilty, but more dangerous. She had known exactly what she was doing. She knew how to manipulate, how to control. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was just angry that she'd been caught. I had no intention of letting them get off lightly. What they thought would be a quick cash grab was now a ticking time bomb, and I had the detonator in my hands. It wasn't just about returning the money they had taken. It wasn't even about the burial plot. This was about them facing the consequences of their actions, of understanding just how deeply they had hurt me, and I wasn't going to give them a way out. It was time to make them pay, in the only way that would make them understand the gravity of what they had done. I started by contacting the lawyer again, setting everything into motion. I had already consulted with him on the legal side of things, but now I needed to take it one step further. I wasn't going to stop at just the sale. I needed to make sure Ricky and Stacy realized they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The sale was void, but that wasn't enough. Ricky had forged my signature, and that was a crime. A serious crime. The more I thought about it, the more the realization hit me. This wasn't just about me and my family anymore. This was about holding them accountable, making sure they understood that there were real consequences for their betrayal, for their theft. I called Ricky again. This time, I didn't bother to pretend to be civil. This was about laying down the law. No more playing nice. When he picked up the phone, I didn't waste a second. "I've spoken to the lawyer," I said, my voice low but firm. "You and Stacy are going to have to deal with the legal consequences of your actions. The forgery, the sale, it's all coming to light. You can't hide behind lies anymore, Ricky. You sold me out. You're going to pay for it." There was a long silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought he might hang up. But when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, please, we didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't think it would lead to this. You didn't think it through at all." I snapped, cutting him off. "You let her talk you into it. You let her manipulate you. And now you both have to face what you've done. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about your integrity, Ricky. It's about you choosing to betray your own mother." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. Please, I'll do anything. Just don't go to the police. Don't." "I already have," I said, the finality of my words sinking in. "I'm not going to let you walk away from this. Not after everything you've done. You're going to face the music, Ricky, and I'm not going to save you." I hung up before he could say another word. I didn't need his apologies anymore. The damage had been done. He had made his choices, and now he would face the consequences, whether he was ready or not. It didn't take long for Stacy to find out what was happening. I didn't bother calling her. She knew the game was over, but that didn't stop her from trying to salvage what was left of her pride. She called me the next day, her voice laced with anger and desperation. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said, practically spitting the words through the phone. "You're going to ruin everything. Ricky's life is already in shambles, and now you're going to make it worse? Just let it go, Tabitha. Let it go and move on." "Move on," I repeated, my voice growing colder with each word. "You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to destroy my family and expect me to just move on like nothing happened. You sold me out, Stacy. You sold my burial plot for a vacation, for a car. And now you think you can just walk away? No, it doesn't work that way." "You don't understand," she said, her tone pleading, but it didn't faze me. "We needed the money. We had bills to pay. Ricky was just trying to help us." "Help," I interrupted. "Help would have been him respecting my wishes. Help would have been him telling you that you were wrong. But no, you both decided to cross that line, and now you're going to face the consequences." I could hear her breath quicken, and for a moment she fell silent. But then her tone shifted, becoming defensive again. "You can't do this," she said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "You can't just ruin our lives because of a mistake. We were only trying to make things better." "No," I said, my voice sharp, final. "You were trying to make things better for you. You were using Ricky, manipulating him, and now you both have to deal with the fallout. You don't get to destroy what's mine, and you certainly don't get to destroy my family. Not anymore." The phone clicked off, and I stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I had done it. I had drawn the line, and now it was up to Ricky and Stacy to pick up the pieces of the mess they had made. But there was one thing I knew for sure. This wasn't the end of it. No, it was just the beginning of their downfall. And I wasn't going to stop until they saw just how far they had fallen. Weeks passed after my confrontation with Ricky and Stacy. I kept my distance, letting the tension build. They were both on edge. I could tell. Ricky avoided my calls, and Stacy's attempts at reconciliation felt more like desperate pleas than genuine remorse. But I didn't want reconciliation. I wanted them to understand. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had done. I didn't let my guard down. Not for a second. Every day, I felt the simmering tension beneath the surface, the anticipation of what would come next. I had already made the decision to follow through with the legal consequences. They had broken the trust I'd given them, and now they would learn that actions like theirs didn't come without a price. The night I'd planned for finally arrived. I knew it was time to meet them again, this time face to face, in the presence of a legal witness. They had no idea what was coming. When Ricky arrived at my door, his face was drawn, tired. There was no sense of pride in his step anymore. He was defeated, and I could see it. Stacy was with him, standing off to the side, her expression unreadable but stiff with discomfort. The anger that had once flared in me now felt muted. I wasn't angry anymore. Now it was all about clarity, about them seeing the consequences for themselves. "Come in," I said. "We need to get this over with." Ricky nodded silently, and they both stepped into the living room. I had arranged for the lawyer to be there, sitting at the dining table with a thick stack of papers. The tension was thick in the air, and even though Ricky and Stacy didn't say a word, I could tell they both understood the gravity of the moment. I didn't waste any time. I sat down, facing them, and I could feel the weight of their gaze. They were both waiting for me to speak, and I knew what was coming next. They didn't realize that I had already planned everything. I wasn't just here to make them apologize. No, they would answer for their actions. "You know why you're here," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You tried to take what wasn't yours. You thought you could sell my burial plot, thinking I wouldn't notice. You thought you could steal from me and walk away clean. Well, you're wrong." I glanced at the lawyer, who nodded as he pulled the legal documents in front of them. He cleared his throat, then began reading from the stack of papers. It was formal, cold, and final. "The deed to the Cedar Lane burial plot has been officially invalidated. The sale is void. Any money collected from the transaction must be returned immediately," he began, his voice clear. "Further, this matter has been referred to law enforcement. The forged signature is a criminal offense. Charges for fraud, identity theft, and forgery are being pursued." Ricky's face drained of color. He looked like he was about to say something, but no words came out. Stacy's eyes flicked nervously from the lawyer to me, and then back to Ricky. She was silent now, but I could tell she was trying to keep her composure. "You're going to pay that money back," I continued, cutting through the silence. "I've already made sure of it. You don't get to take what's mine and walk away without facing consequences. The only way out of this is to make it right." Stacy opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "I've heard enough," I said, my voice unwavering. "No more excuses. No more lies. The consequences of your actions are irreversible. I don't care what excuses you try to make. The damage is done. You thought you could destroy my legacy for a few $1,000s, and now you're going to learn that you don't mess with what's mine." There was a long pause. Ricky didn't meet my eyes. Stacy fidgeted in her seat, and I could see her jaw tighten with frustration. "This is where you understand what it means to cross the line," I continued, leaning forward slightly. "This isn't just about me. This is about what you both thought was acceptable. You thought I was weak, that you could do whatever you wanted, take what you wanted, and there would be no consequences. Well, I'm here to make sure you understand. You don't get to take from people without paying for it." I could see the regret in Ricky's eyes now, and maybe some shame, but it wasn't enough. This wasn't just about feeling sorry for themselves. It wasn't enough to make it right just by apologizing. The world didn't work that way, and neither did I. "Ricky," I said, my voice softer now but still firm. "This is about you understanding that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect. And when you betray that respect, it can never go back to the way it was." He looked up at me, eyes full of remorse. "Mom, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to fix things. I thought it would be quick, and we could put it behind us. I didn't think it would go this far." "And that's your problem," I said. You didn't think. You let her think for you. You let Stacy manipulate you, and now you're both paying for it. That's the price you pay for not thinking for yourself. I turned my attention to Stacy. And you, I said, meeting her eyes. You thought you could pull the strings from behind the scenes, using Ricky as your puppet. But I'm the one holding the strings now. And you're going to see just how much damage your actions have caused. Stacy didn't speak. She didn't even try to defend herself. She knew there was nothing left to say. I stood up, turning to the lawyer. I want everything documented. Everything we've discussed. Ricky and Stacy will pay back every cent. And I'll make sure they understand the full extent of their crimes. Ricky looked up at me, his face full of sorrow. I'll fix it, Mom. I swear. I'll make it right. I shook my head. You can't fix this. Not all of it. But you can start by making sure it never happens again. You'll pay the price for this, but you'll learn from it. You'll learn that there are things that can't be undone. As they left, I stood there, feeling the calm wash over me. It was done. The line had been drawn, and the consequences had been set in motion. Ricky and Stacy had thought they could get away with it. They had underestimated me, but now they were going to live with the truth of their choices. I hadn't just made them pay. I had made them learn. And that was the greatest revenge of all.